Legend of Total War here, and today we're doing another tier list using Tier Maker, this time ranking every single legendary lord in Immortal Empires based on how challenging I think their campaigns are. Some of these legendary lords are extremely powerful on the battlefield, have very good economies, and they basically just plow through their initial enemies because they're not surrounded by dangerous legendary lords in the first place. Other ones have weak economies, take a little while before they really get powerful, and are surrounded by very dangerous and belligerent enemies, and one misstep can lead to basically a disaster campaign. There is a massive difference between an easy campaign and one that is completely brutal. And before we get into actually ranking all of these guys, I do need to let you guys know that this video here is sponsored by Manscaped. You guys know I've been with Manscaped for ages. Love the product, love working with them. I don't shave my face very often, but when I do, it's always been with the Manscaped electric razor. The latest product, the Chairman Pro package, has got everything I need for a smooth shave. The Chairman Pro itself is easy to use and versatile, so you get the shave you want. Close or rugged, it's up to you. Personally, I like to see how fast I can go from full beard to nothing, and it's usually about 2 to 3 minutes. It also comes with the Power Shave Gel and the Face Shave Soother. Check out Manscaped with my link in the description and pinned comment for 20% off plus free international shipping. Big thanks to Manscaped for sponsoring this video. With that being said, let's get into the tier list itself. We're starting with the Wood Elves and just going through this race by race. I will also cover the DLC legendary lords that are coming, even though I haven't had a chance to play them yet because the DLC hasn't come out yet. I have had a chance to watch other people play it, and so I'm going to be ranking them based on what I've seen so far. Okay, so starting off with the Sisters of Twilight, I'm going to be ranking them as easy, but definitely not too easy, because the Wood Elves, I think, have an inherent weakness that disables them from being some of the easiest factions in the game, and that is their lack of defensibility. They have some of the most powerful armies in the game that are fairly easy to use, and the Sisters of Twilight are an incredibly powerful legendary lord with very powerful campaign mechanics. However, your outpost settlements are never truly safe, not until you've secured the border and killed everyone in that area. So you're always prone to having even a small army come in and capture outposts, and your tree settlements, if you don't leave them adequately defended, a surprise attack can come in and capture it, since you're completely unable to build walls to delay the enemy forces if they do move into the area. And some of the times the garrisons are not particularly good, and so you're definitely vulnerable if you don't pay attention. Another problem that the Wood Elves have in terms of making their campaign easy is that you'll usually end up with fragmented empires because of your ability to use the deep woods. So from the Witch Woods, you'll eventually go to either Athel Loren or to any of the other tree settlements and have to split your forces across a wide area across the map in order to start restoring the trees that are out there. And that will just mean that you've just got a really wide border, and a wide border can be difficult to defend. So that's one of the challenges that they'll face. Now that's something that all of the Wood Elves will suffer from, but if you're looking for the easiest of the Wood Elves campaign, I would definitely say it would be the Sisters of Twilight. They start off in the strongest position out of any of them, in my opinion. Then we move on to Durthu. So Durthu starts off in Athel Loren, in the northern part of it. Starts off with Oak of Ages. In fact, the only one of the Wood Elves that doesn't start off with the Oak of Ages is Draika. She has to actually go and capture it herself, or if Durthu owns it, you can confederate with her, but we'll get to that in a minute. So Durthu starts off at war with some Dwarfs at Carrick Norn. Reasonably challenging, not super difficult. So I'm going to put it at moderate, because I don't think it's as easy as the Sisters of Twilight campaign. Again, you suffer from the same issues, and you need to play a fairly strong diplomacy game, just because your resources in the early stages of the campaign will be quite limited, but Durthu's armies, if focused on forest spirits, can be very powerful. So can go either way sometimes with Wood Elves. Okay, then Draika. I also think that she has a moderately challenging campaign. She starts off isolated from the other Wood Elves that don't particularly like her, except for Durthu. In the Griffin Wood, your initial enemies are pretty easy if you focus on the Empire. Empire is a very easy opponent to begin with, but there are some dangerous legendary lords in the nearby area, such as Vlad von Carstein, Azag the Slaughterer, Katarin, and Festus the Leech Lord. However, their initial priorities aren't really Draika, And so you can pick and choose your opponents with care. You're most likely going to be going up against Vlad because he is the most aggressive out of all of them, but a bit of careful diplomacy can prevent that. Your armies are very powerful. Playing as Drakish is a very powerful legendary lord, but it's always a case of got to be careful about enemies getting towards your tree settlement because it can cripple your campaign if you lose that. It doesn't matter how many outposts you've got if you lose your main tree settlement. So I'm going to put that at moderate. So next up is Orion. Orion's a bit of a weird one because you could argue Orion is one of the most powerful factions in the game, but leaning into his faction mechanic where the more wars he's in, the lower his upkeep cost is, that can actually be quite challenging. So you can get super powerful with him, not going to deny that, but this isn't a power ranking, this is a challenge one. So it really depends on the player as to how challenging you want this campaign to be in order to lean into these things. Do you want to have a This is Total War campaign where you declare war on everyone and just build just mass amounts of armies because they're free upkeep? If that's the campaign, you'll probably actually have a challenging campaign. And that's honestly the way I like to play it. However, I think most people probably aren't going to lean into it that heavily, and so we'll probably end up in a very similar sort of campaign that Durthu has. Moderate sort of challenge. You'll end up in a couple of wars. It'll reduce your upkeep cost by a little bit, but it won't be significantly noticeable. That being said, if you're looking for a challenge campaign, do a This is Total War campaign with Orion. It can be very satisfying just because of having so many armies at your disposal, but also so many enemies. Okay, so that's the Wood Elves there. So in my opinion, they're a moderately to easy challenging faction to play. Okay, then we move on to the Warriors of Chaos. Starting with Be'lakor. Be'lakor is another one that is extremely powerful, but is not necessarily super easy because you start off in Albion, right? Albion, very easy to conquer. And then from there, where you go can massively change how difficult your campaign is because you've got the ability to teleport to either the Griffinwood, where Dryker will be waiting for you, which probably would be difficult to handle in the beginning stage of the campaign, or you can go down to the Southern Chaos Wastes, where you'll find Tzeentch waiting for you. Kara's Fate Weaver, also a very challenging enemy to begin with, or you can set sail to Bretonnia, or you can set sail to Norsca. Norsca is usually where I go, and that usually puts you at odds with Wulfric the Wanderer, who can build up fairly quickly. So I do think that Be'lakor is an extremely powerful potential faction, but doesn't necessarily steamroll immediately. He eventually becomes a super powerhouse, no doubt about that, but I'm going to put his campaign at easy, because in my opinion, there are much easier campaigns. Just because you've got a lot of choice here, someone who's played it for the first time might struggle to know which is the best way to go. Okay, then we've got Village the Curseling. Village is like the opposite case when it comes to Be'lakor. He's only got one direction to go, really, because he starts off in a corner of the map. There's no other directions to go except for west and south if you want. So your initial enemies are Cathay. Very easy to deal with them at the start of the campaign. So I actually think that Village's campaign is easier than Be'lakor's, even though Be'lakor's overall max potential is much higher than Village, because Be'lakor can confederate every single legendary lord, every single Chaos Warrior legendary lord, and Village can't confederate anyone. But that being said, you are very unlikely to lose a campaign playing as Village the Curseling, because it is so goddamn difficult for any of your opponents to actually get to your final settlement. So you're very secure. Even if you're really bad at the game, you will have plenty of opportunities to just rebuild your army, try again, and then just keep going from his start position. It's a very forgiving campaign. You're allowed to make a lot of mistakes. Thereby, very easy. Not the easiest one. So easiest ones, I will move in front of it. I don't usually do that, but I just want to make that distinction here. Okay, then we've got Valkyr. I think Valkyr is very powerful, but she also has very powerful enemies nearby. So she's got the Dark Elves, so both Hellebrand and Malekith, and also the Dwarfs. It's called Grombrindle. All of those can be very powerful opponents. Definitely something that Valkyr can handle without too much difficulty. I reckon, though, that her campaign is moderately challenging. Okay, then we move on to Azazel. Azazel, I think's initial campaign is actually hard, because you start off in this weird location in Norsca, doing just a weird war where you're kind of going backwards. You end up wasting a fair bit of time at the initial part of the campaign fighting a minor Kislevite faction. And then there is Castalton right there as your next obvious enemy. And Castalton does tend to recruit a lot of force very quickly. And the early game Warriors of Chaos economy is not particularly strong. So you need to move hard and fast playing as Azazel. And another problem with this as well is that capturing the territory going down south is of very little value to you. So the game sort of leans you towards a lot of territory that just isn't very profitable whatsoever, at least until you go over to Prague maybe, if you decide to go that way. There are a fair few allies in the area, apart from the vassals that you can establish in Norsca, so not the most brutal campaign, but definitely one that if you make a mistake early on can cost you big time. You are not super secure in the Tower of Crack, not like Village, who basically can just lose constantly and just no one's really going to get over there because of how much chaos corruption they'll take out on the way there. So you got to be a little bit more careful with Azazel. But he is a very powerful legendary lord. Doesn't mean your campaign can't end in failure if you make mistakes. Okay, then we've got Sigvald the Magnificent. Starts off in the Northern Chaos Waste, just right before, just east of the Dark Elf position. I think that this is a pretty easy campaign. There's not really any massive powerful legendary lords nearby, so you can grab a fair few vassals picking on minor factions very easily. So I'm going to put this one here at moderate, because I don't think his faction effects are that powerful, but also his start position is kind of moderate. So that's where I'm going to put him there. There's not too much to say about it. I think it's a pretty standard sort of campaign. Making a mistake is usually okay, but you don't want to make too many. Okay, then we've got Festus. So I think Festus's campaign is super easy, just like with Village, because the Brass Keep is a settlement that takes the Empire forces, your initial enemies, quite a while to get to. So if you make a mistake and you end up getting Festus killed, you've got a bit of time to raise another army. Another thing is that the early game Empire is super easy for Warriors of Chaos to deal with. If anything, I think that the Empire has some of the worst AI out of any faction in the game. All you really need to do is just charge at them. That's it. Festus is also incredibly powerful, can essentially be a one-man doomstack. The only real problem that Festus faces is that there's not that many dark fortresses in the area, and there's not much point turning Empire factions into vassals. Just don't think you get a whole lot of value out of that. So super easy campaign, but I don't think it's anywhere near the most powerful of the Legendary Lords for the Warriors of Chaos. It's just ridiculously easy start position. Nobody really can face him. Even if you end up going to war with Karl Franz and Boris Todbringer, they are usually just so easy to defeat in the early stage of the campaign. So you have a strong early campaign, you can easily get to Altdorf. There's just no problem whatsoever for Festus. Okay, then we've got Kolek Suneater. So Kolek has a bit of a challenge. I'm going to put this at hard because you are sandwiched between Tamarkan in the north and Grimgor to your south, and also Zatan the Black to your east. And you've got to pick very carefully which one you want to engage with in the early stage of the campaign. You start off at war with Tamarkan, but you can get out of it if you want. If you move quickly enough, you can stop him from getting onto his Plague Toad, Toad Dragon, which turns him into an absolute nightmare. And Kolek does win in an engagement against Tamarkan in the early stage of the campaign. But you still got to be careful, because you make one mistake and you end up losing that battle against either one of these enemies, and your campaign could be over very quickly. So that's one that is more challenging, in my opinion, for the Warriors of Chaos. Possibly even more challenging than Azazel's campaign, in my opinion. Okay, then we've got Archaon. Archaon I'm going to put as too easy. I'm going to put it ahead of both of these. He starts off in a super secure position. Everyone just bows down to Archaon in the north. You just basically plow through all of your initial enemies, no problem. You make so much money, you get so much resources, and every single dark fortress that you obtain it just makes all the other Chaos forces like you, and you're surrounded by Chaos forces, so you can fight them if you want, but they usually don't bother challenging you. Archaon himself is essentially a one-man Doomstack, gets super powerful very quickly. You're just not going to get challenged, unless you are super bad at the game, which, that happens. This is one of the easiest campaigns in the game, and the fact that Archaon can confederate all of the other Warriors of Chaos Legendary Lords leads to an incredibly powerful campaign, where the AI is just going to really struggle at capturing your last settlement, like if you're particularly bad at it. Your initial true enemy, I suppose, is going to be Boris Ursus, but to be honest, it's just not difficult for Archaon to beat him. Okay, so then we move on to the vampire accounts. We've got Helm and Gorst. I think Helm and Gorst had it quite good at the beginning of Immortal Empires, but it's gradually getting more difficult as new players arrive in the area, as they get reworks and such. So where it would have initially have been probably easy, I think now it's something in the moderate sort of challenge area. Zombies aren't the unlimited regenerating things that they used to be, but that was a bug. They still do have a lot of regen, and zombies are very powerful. But that being said, Nurgle is more powerful than they were before, so it's a decent challenge, and you're going to be facing up against Kugath Plaguefather immediately. There's no stopping that. Okay, then we move on to Isabella. I really should be ranking Isabella and Vlad simultaneously because they are... it's basically the same start position, and the different bonuses that they provide are trivial, so I'm going to put them in the exact same position. I think that from the vampire accounts point of view, this is the easiest one, in my opinion. Having played them all, I think this is the easiest start position for the vampire accounts. I'm going to put them both under easy. Start off in Drakenhof. You start with 2 settlements, which is a plus. The Templehof faction is super easy to deal with, and the surrounding Empire factions, as I've said before with Festus, just super easy to beat down on them. However, the Dwarfs, you can only ignore them for so long, and there is the Changeling fairly close by. These are factions that could cause a problem. This is a faction that is pretty hated by everyone else, but there is some diplomatic things that you can do in their skill trees to improve things, which is why I'm not quite putting them up into too easy. In my opinion, the Warriors of Chaos as a race is more powerful than vampire accounts. It largely depends on what you value, because I think the Warriors of Chaos, like roster, their actual army, miles ahead of the vampire accounts army. But vampire accounts have, in many ways, better heroes, slightly. So I'm going to put them both there at easy. Basically, this is a good campaign to try if you're looking for your first vampire account campaign. Play as Vlad or Isabella. Personally, I recommend Vlad and having Isabella as a hero. Okay, then we've got Heinrich Kemmler. So Heinrich Kemmler, very powerful legendary lord, starts in a bit of a precarious position, surrounded by very powerful enemies. Your initial enemy being Artois is quite easy, but other enemies can get powerful very quickly. So I'm going to put this one here at moderate as well. Similar sort of situation that Gorst has. You're probably going to be fighting Lewin Leoncoeur and Karl Franz very early on. And if you don't do some good diplomacy, you could also end up fighting Grom the Paunch on top of that. But the vampire accounts are able to face off against multiple opponents without too much challenge. So diplomacy is their weak point, but they do have the ability to just mass produce armies. Okay, then we've got Manfred. So Manfred is incredibly powerful, and with his ability to obtain the Books of Nagash, he's more powerful than ever. But the initial problem that Manfred is going to have is Volkmar the Grim. It's just that in the early stage of the campaign, you're probably only going to be recruiting trash, and your economy is just not super good at the start. And Volkmar the Grim will be able to basically match you in that early stage of the campaign. But once you have overcome Volkmar the Grim, then nothing else in the area is going to be a problem. You could decide not to engage with Volkmar the Grim first if you want, but the problem is he might just declare war on you. Cetra is typically a very easy opponent if you wanted to go north, and it doesn't really get more difficult when time goes on just because of his inability to really produce a lot of armies, whereas opposed to you being able to produce absolute tons really quickly. So yeah, get rid of Helmengorst. I keep saying that. Volkmar the Grim, and then everyone else in the area is not too bad. Your worst enemy in the area, though, is probably either going to be Skarbrand or Thorek Ironbrow. Probably Thorek Ironbrow. So just be careful when going up against Thorek, because he is an absolute pain in the ass. So I'm going to put Manfred at moderate, just because he is kind of in the Thunderdome there. But if you do overcome these opponents, Manfred is incredibly powerful. But like I said, this isn't a power ranking one. This is about how challenging their initial start position is. And if you're good with vampire counts, well then obviously you'll consider this to be too easy. But if you've never played Manfred before, there are a few things that could throw a bit of a curveball on you in this campaign. Okay, now we move on to the Vampire Coast. So with Aranessa Saltspite being the first one here, I've always considered Aranessa to be one of the weakest and least interesting lords in the game. I just do not like Sartosa, but their initial starting difficulty is not really that tough. You start off going to war with Tilia. They are easier to deal with, and you can move on to the Border Princes after that. It's fairly easy to negotiate with Icaclaw. Don't really recommend going up against the rats in the early stage of the campaign. And then you're not really going up against that many legendary lords in the early stage. And if you do go up against them, you've got pretty good tools for dealing with them. I think that this is a relatively easy campaign. I'm just not fond of it, that's all. Okay, then we've got Silostra. So she starts off in Nagaroth. Starts closest enemy being Elithanar. So that can be a very challenging opponent. Moving quickly on Elithanar is fairly easy with the Vampire Coast due to your ability to just raise the dead, as opposed to them having to just recruit the old-fashioned way. You can get the jump on them extremely quickly, and once you've dealt with Elithanar, it's really not that much of a challenge. So I'm going to put this one here as easy, and I think it's easier than Aranessa's. Okay, then we've got Luther Harkon. So Luther Harkon starting off in Lustria, very powerful enemies nearby. So I think this one's a little bit more on the harder side of things, just because of the powerful enemies nearby. There's very few opponents that you just beat down with absolute ease, and that's what these two really have. The fact that you're close to Itza, and now you're close to Skulltaker as well, and there's just a lot of powerful enemies, and the early game Vampire Coast units are just fucking trash. But Luther Harkon himself is really bloody good. So once you get past that initial, take out one of those legendary lords, it shouldn't be too bad, because their overall economy is pretty good. But it's just that initial hump that I think is a problem. So I'm going to put him at moderate. Don't think it's as easy as these two, just because of you don't have a choice. You're going to have to go up against a legendary lord to begin with. And that's where the challenge lies in that one. Okay, then we've got Noctilus. Noctilus, in my opinion, is the most powerful of the 4 Vampire Coast legendary lords. You start off with the Maelstrom. It's a settlement that is less likely to be invaded than others, even though it doesn't have walls. You won't really see them coming. It's just that the AI doesn't really travel by sea for invasions all that often. It definitely does happen, but just not that often. But you do start yourself off in Ulthuan on the western side of it, where there are no legendary lords, until you, of course, counter Tyrion. So it's pretty easy going, smashing Calador and Tiranoc in the early stage of the campaign. So I'm going to put Noctilus at easy at the forefront here. Once he's on his Necrofex Colossus mount, he's just ridiculously powerful. But the problem that some people, I think, face when dealing with Noctilus is that it's so easy to begin with that they get too aggressive. They push in too fast into Ulthuan, and they end up fighting a multiple front war with Avalorn and Etain, and that's where things can fall apart. But that's just player mistakes, I guess. So that's why it doesn't end up in too easy, because there are some legendary lords that you should be at least somewhat careful about. But that being said, you can just go plunder around and not actually occupy any settlements if you really want. There's nothing stopping you from doing that. And if you don't want to be in Ulthuan, just go somewhere else. Because at the end of the day, as long as you keep leveling up and you keep building up your shipbuilding, even if you lose the Maelstrom, who cares? Okay, now move on to Tzeentch. Okay, so we've got Kairos Fateweaver. Kairos Fateweaver is extremely powerful, but his campaign is brutal. This is one of the most difficult campaign start positions of any legendary lord in the game. This campaign gives you a trick start. It basically leads you to expanding eastward around the southern Chaos Waste, taking out demonic factions. This is a mistake. Don't do that, because in the time that it takes you to wipe out that Slaaneshi faction, Teclis and Oxyotl have got their shit together, and they have just got their eyes set on you. So Tzeentch's economy in the early stage of the campaign is garbage. It's not very good. And Kairos becomes supremely powerful as he levels up. And unfortunately, you're just not going to be that supremely powerful at rank 4 or whatever. It just takes time to build it all up. And so you have no choice but to fight either Teclis or Oxyotl really kind of before it's comfortable to do so. And so you're up for a tough fight very early on. So that's why it's going to be put here as brutal. I think I get so many disasters sent in before turn 20 with Kairos Fate Weaver, just because, Oxyotl just plows through the Tzeentchian factions so easily and then gets to you. And most people will have their army not defending their capital, and they're at the other side of the Chaos Waste, or they'll be attacking Teclis when Oxyotl arrives. So you'll end up in a two-front war very quickly. So this campaign is made easy if you are super bloody aggressive and you can take out Teclis within 5 seconds of the campaign, basically. But yeah, this is a brutal campaign, which is funny because the other Tzeentchian faction, the Changeling, is the easiest faction in the entire fucking game by a country mile. This is the campaign where you basically can't lose. Well, at least it kind of used to be that way. So you don't have settled settlements, you've got these cults. And it's kind of difficult to lose a cult unless you're really stupid, because all you have to do is just keep the discoverability low. It's pretty simple. It's very basic. I can't imagine anyone who plays strategy game can't really understand this concept. Just keep the discoverability low, and then they can't discover you, and you can't lose a settlement. Even if the settlement gets blown up by someone else, doesn't matter. Your cult remains. Now, the Changeling remains hidden in areas where he has a cult, but this is where you can lose the campaign. If your army is at any point is wiped out, all of your cults will get discovered. So that wasn't the case when he first was introduced into the game. He was basically invincible. You just literally couldn't lose. But now, if the Changeling is wiped off from the map, his army is, all of your cults will be discovered, which means it's only a matter of time before the AI demolish them, and basically you have to start again. So you have to be very careful with him. But it's actually very easy to be careful. Just stay in a region. They can't see you. If you just stay on the edges of it, where there's no roads, they're just not going to discover you. So a player that's new to it can just sit in a corner and basically accumulate wealth and just do nothing, as long as you're sitting in an area that's just not likely to get any traffic. And that being said, the Tzeentchian forces are pretty good against the Empire forces. You start off with a war with a really easy opponent. So very easy campaign there. It doesn't get any easier than the Changelings campaign. Okay, then we move on to the Tomb Kings. So Arkan the Black, in my opinion, has the best of the Tomb King campaigns, because he starts off with actually having 2 armies, which is really annoying for the other guys who spend the first 15, 14 turns or whatever, only having 1 army full of trash. Early game Tomb Kings is kind of painful in Warhammer 3, just because everyone else gets up and running pretty quickly, but the Tomb Kings are I have to wait 15 turns before I get my second army full of skeleton crap, because, I built a barracks, but I can only get 3 Tomb Guard, or whatever it is. It's not really enough to get sort of good armies going, but Arkan the Black, he gets moving pretty quickly. So I think that Arkan's in a pretty good position where you can take things out fairly easily, even on legendary difficulty. I'm going to put him at easy. Okay, then we've got Khalida. So Khalida, pretty much opposite situation. I think that this is actually one of the most brutal campaigns in the game, because Khalida starts off at war with a minor vampire faction. She starts off with a minor settlement, and that minor vampire faction has access to multiple armies. And unless you know exactly what's going to happen, they can capture your capital really quickly. And also your ability to recruit at the early stage of the campaign, you can only recruit trash. And it's just not that powerful on the battlefield. Also, once you've dealt with the Silver Host, you have Queek Head Taker to your north. You've got the Last Defenders to your south, so Krokgar, and you've got Thorek Ironbrow to your west. You're fucked no matter what direction you go in unless you are like truly ready for it. So Khalida has one of the most brutal campaigns. Highly not recommended that you give Khalida a go as your first Tomb King campaign. I've been sent in so many disasters before basically turn 10 with her. It's a very tough start position. Okay, then we've got Ketep. Ketep is nestled in a pretty safe location. You start off very close to the Sisters of Twilight, but you're not their initial focus, so you can negotiate with them fairly easily. So I don't think... Oh, wait, hang on. That's not Ketep. That's actually Cetra. That's, okay. Ketep. Yeah, you start off... God damn, all these Tomb Kings look alike. So, yeah, Ketep here. Starts off close to the Sisters of Twilight. But your initial enemies aren't that difficult to deal with. You do also start fairly close to Taurox. Taurox is actually not that difficult to take out. He mostly just sits in his Herdstone doing nothing. But he's pretty belligerent. You also start close to Grombrindle, but Ketep has reasonable ways of negotiating. So you're going to have to go up against some Legendary Lords at some point. So I do think it is quite hard. But I don't think it's as difficult as Khalida, because at least you start off with a city that's kind of difficult to just instantly go towards and capture. You also have better faction bonuses than Khalida, in my opinion, but Naggaroth can be quite an unforgiving place. You also start off very far away from the Hekara, away from all the good landmark buildings, so that's a bit annoying. He just doesn't have any good stuff in Naggaroth. Okay, then we've got the actual Cetra here. Okay, not Ketep. I'm bloody blind. No, it's just like, it looks so similar. Anyway, Cetra here. So he starts off in Khemri. I don't think it's the easiest campaign. It used to be before, of the Tomb Kings that is, before Arkan the Black got his second army with Total Warhammer 3. So he is surrounded by very dangerous opponents. You've got Manfred von Carstein, you've got Scarbrand, the Bretonnians nearby, you've got Volkmar the Grim. You start off at war with Arkan the Black. There's Thorek Ironbrow. There's a lot that can go wrong in a Khemri campaign with Cetra. But Cetra is very powerful and can level up pretty quickly to be very powerful. Once he's on either his Khemrian War Sphinx mount or his Chariot of the Gods, he can easily get hundreds of kills in every battle. He's a moderate spellcaster, but overall he's a very good fighter, very good commander as well. And Khemri is quite rich, starting off with some gold. So I'm going to put this one here at moderate difficulty, just because I do not think it's as easy as Arkan's start position, as he kind of starts off in a corner of a continent, and you're not going to get invaded via the sea. Very, very unlikely. Whereas he starts completely surrounded by powerful legendary lords, and one of the most powerful legendary lords in the game, Scarbrand. That's not an easy opponent. You're guaranteed to have to fight Scarbrand early on, and that's a pain in the ass. Okay, then we've got Slaanesh. So Nakari starts off in Northern Ulthuan. Doesn't go up against any major opponents straight away. The first one you'll probably go up against is either Avalon or Ivres, depending on which direction you go in. So you're geared towards going towards against Krace to begin with. Not super difficult. It's up to you if you want to vassalize them and use them to help you conquer the rest of it. But rest of Ulthuan, that is. Your initial economy is not great. They've got some very powerful mechanics that sort of kick in like the middle stage of the campaign with like the devotee armies as you start to accumulate Slaanesh corruption and lots of devotees. That's very good. But your early game units are real glass cannons and require a fair bit of micromanagement. And while I wouldn't go so far as to say it's brutal, I do think that this is a reasonably hard campaign. Because you have no real friends in the area. I mean, you can force them to be your friends by vassalizing them. But even then, they're not reliable allies when you vassalize them. Okay, so now we move on to the Skaven. We've got Throt the Unclean. So Throt is extremely powerful, no doubt about that. Very powerful legendary lord. But surrounded by very dangerous Legendary Lords. To the north, you've got Malachi McCason, which when controlled by the AI seems to flounder a fair bit. Doesn't even end up taking out his initial enemy for ages. But you've also got Castalton and Katarin very early on that you'll have to deal with. So get your ambush success ready, get your cellular instabilities as ready as possible, because those two factions tend to pump out armies very quickly. Now you can have a very strong start playing as Moldar, but you can also completely fuck up very early on if you recruit nothing but trash and then end up fighting against a superior Kislev army. Getting an early ambush on either one of these factions can make a big difference, and that is largely due to luck and skill. So I'm going to put Throth the Unclean as a moderately challenging campaign, just because of the opponents that you're going up against are not pushovers. Okay, then we've got Tzeentch, who is all the way in Cathay. I don't think it's a particularly challenging campaign, but you do start off with your capital being a minor settlement, meaning it's vulnerable. Everybody in the area hates you. Your initial economy is not great. You can kind of ally with Lockyer Fellheart, but I wouldn't really rely on that too much. Cathay forces in the early stages of the campaign are pretty easy to defeat. They're mostly full of peasants, but if you do go up against Jade Warriors, which are a tier 1 unit, it's a good thing that Eshin units do have armor piercing, so prioritizing getting those as early as possible will be good. But as always, just being able to almost guarantee an ambush does make a big difference. But yeah, it's not the easiest campaign either, and I do think it's roughly about as challenging as Clan Moldar's campaign, but obviously on a different side of the world. Okay, then we've got Craventail. Not a big fan of Tzeentch, never have been, probably never will be. I think he's quite a boring legendary lord, but at least he's moved away from Nagaroth, which was initially with Warhammer 2, and has moved back to Crookback Mountain, where his Clan Rictus's actual clan is supposed to be. Very dangerous legendary lords surround you. You've got Karaza Karak to your west. You've got Skarsnik. You've got Imrik and the other Chaos Dwarfs in the area, and you're not too far away from Grimgor either. This is a very dangerous area. I wouldn't go so far as to say it's brutal, because Tzeentch actually does have a lot of tools at his disposal to work with, but I would go so far as to say it is a fairly hard campaign, just because he's not the best of the Skaven legendary lords, but the Skaven as a race are incredibly powerful. You know, just being able to use food to pump your settlements up to tier 5 and just get your best units, you know, at the beginning stages of the campaign is a big advantage for any Skaven faction. Okay, then we've got Ikiclaw. Ikiclaw is one of the most powerful lords in the game, but in Warhammer 3, I don't think it's super easy anymore, largely because of the presence of Morgr. Most players decide that they want to get rid of Morgr early because he causes chaos, corruption, and he stops you from being able to ruin dwell the Estalians. The Estalians are pushovers, that's not a problem. And the problem is getting really good units going early so that you can actually take on the Beastmen. Now, I do have a guide on how you can take out Morgr on turn 2, but that's not necessarily intuitive. Again, this is for people who, if you've not watched a guide and never played the game before, picking up Ikiclaw, it can be a bit of a trap if you decide to declare war on Morgr, because Morgr is basically immune to missile fire, and that is kind of what is Ikiclaw's thing. So you trade very badly against Morgr. Now, that being said, you could just decide not to fight Morgr. That's totally an option, but I do find that most people do. Going after Tilia is an easier option, especially if you can get Magritta essentially before Aranessa gobbles it up. There are some powerful legendary lords around you, but at the same time, the more enemies that you fight as Skaven, it's kind of the better, because you get more food, but that doesn't necessarily make it easier. I do, however, think that... Sorry, no, I wasn't putting that in brutal. I do think it is a fairly easy campaign. I'd probably put it somewhere around in the middle there. But definitely not too easy, just because some of the opponents, you know, they definitely can beat you in the early stages of the campaign. You get past the early stage and you're flying from there. You know, use up too many nukes, that's a problem. Because that's the thing, like, nukes are super powerful, for sure, but you certainly can run out of them. Okay, then we move on to Skrulk. So Skrulks and Lustria, very powerful enemies nearby. Definitely not putting this one here at easy. Doesn't really have his own true campaign mechanic. His plagues are pretty good for him. You got to move pretty hard and fast if you want to smash both Tehenowin, that's coming from your south, and Gorok that's coming from your north. You got to be very careful there. So I'm going to put this one here at hard as well, but I don't think it's quite as hard as Tzeentch, so I'm just going to move it ahead there just by a little bit. So I do think that Skrulk is a better legendary lord, and his faction is more powerful than Clan Rectus. It's just that you are forced to face off against more powerful legendary lords earlier on, because they're coming for you. And then we've got Queek Headtaker. So Queek starts off in the Misty Mountains. Pretty easy for him. Like, if you want to go and take on Khalida early on, Khalida's fucking easy to go and smash. It's so easy with rats. No problem whatsoever. So the thing is as well, because the Tomb Kings pump out units really quickly, you can actually farm them quite a bit for food, and Lamia is a very valuable settlement as well. So I think that Queek, whether you go north, south, east, or west, it's pretty easy with Queek. So I'm going to put it as easy, but not as easy as Ikiclaw. So that's where I'm going to put him. Okay, now we're moving on to the Ogres. Now you might notice that it's only the two that are currently in the game here. I'm going to get to the other ones all last. So the new ones I'm going to get to it last. I haven't played those yet. Anyway, so starting with Scrag. I actually think that Scrag is a better legendary lord currently than Greasus Goldtooth. Again, I haven't played either of them updated. I do think that their faction effects updates are going to make quite a sizable difference in how difficult their campaigns are going to be. It's going to be easier for them than it was before. So I'm going to take that into consideration here, because I have played both of these campaigns reasonably extensively. Ogres are not my favorite, but I do think Scrag's position is easier, just because the enemies that you're going up against are sort of Southern Realms or Empire, and I just think that this is a very easy opponent. There are some Dwarfs nearby, but you can negotiate with them. There's Greenskins nearby. You can negotiate with them. So I'm going to put Scrag's campaign as moderate for difficulty. Again, taking into account his update. And as for Greasus Goldtooth, I'm going to put that at hard, because even with his update, you still have Nurgle and... Kugath Plaguefather and what's his face down south, Helman Gorst. They probably have to be dealt with. You can negotiate reasonably well with the western provinces. Probably a good idea to do so. And to your north, you've got Grimgor Ironhide. So that is never going to be easy for anyone to deal with in the early stage of the campaign. And it's basically guaranteed that he will call a war on you when you play as Greasus. So I'm going to put that one there as hard. I don't think it's brutal. I just think it is quite a challenge. Okay, then we've got Nurgle. So Epidemius is first. I think that Epidemius probably has the most challenging start position out of the three, just because your initial enemy is a Tzeentchian faction, and Nurgle is basically hard countered to Tzeentch, but at the same time, the Demon Prince can help you out. But for every territory that the Demon Prince takes is a territory that you don't get. Then your next opponent, if it isn't the Demon Prince, is pretty much Malice Darkblade, and you definitely can't handle it. But Malice Darkblade is not really the enemy that you want to go up against first, because Tsarkan, he'll always have the ability for Tsarkan, and they'll always have a Black Ark nearby, and they do pump out armies pretty quickly. And that is something that Nurgle kind of is a bit slow at doing in the early stage of the campaign. Going down south, you've got the Masters of Innovation down there. Not great to go up against early game flying units, I guess, with Epidemius, not really great at it. So I'm going to put Epidemius as a hard campaign. I think it's quite challenging, just because you don't really have particularly good tools to work with, don't have fantastic economy, but once you get past that a bit, you definitely start to snowball for sure. Okay, then there's Tamrakhan. Tamrakhan is very powerful, not going to deny that, but you have to fight Colex Suneater early in the campaign, and that's where the real challenge is. As soon as you've overcome that, the challenge is basically over. But that's what it's all about. You've got to be able to overcome Colex Suneater. And the problem with Nurgle is lack of recruitment capacity, whereas the Warriors of Chaos, they are able to simply out-recruit you. So you got to move pretty damn quick, or use your army and the three-quarter army that you can actually recruit, because it takes quite a while before you get your first additional unit, and use your just recruit some extra lords, which will of course increase your supply lines, and try to ambush Colex forces. So particularly challenging at the early stage. And then after that, you've got Grimgor Ironhide down to the south, or you've got Archaon to your north. Now, Archaon's pretty easy to deal with because he doesn't actually consider you a priority. He doesn't come after you. So you don't have to go after him if you don't want to. But once you've got just a couple of settlements with Tamrakon, it's pretty easy going from there. So I'm going to put this one here as easy. Just stipulate that it's all about overcoming Kolek. Once you've done that, it's really not a problem whatsoever. Okay, then we've got Kugath Plaguefather. Kugath still suffers from the same problems he always has. Limited recruitment in the early stage of the campaign does take a little while before you start getting your first units, and you're going to be going up against Helman Gorse, who is able to pump out zombies and trash units like crazy. Now, that being said, it used to be a lot more difficult than it is now, because he used to start off with essentially 2 Mortis engines himself and a Mortis engine. And now that I don't think he's got the Mortis engine anymore, it's a lot easier for Kugath to get things going. So I'm going to put this as moderate because it's a bit easier for him now, and his economy is a bit better. You get things going a bit quicker now with Kugath Plaguefather, so moderate's where I'm going to put that. Okay, then we've got the Norscan factions. So I think Norsca got a big upgrade in Total Warhammer 3 compared to Warhammer 2. I would have put both of these at brutal in Warhammer 2, but in Warhammer 3, I think both of them are pretty sort of standard moderate. Definitely an increased bit of challenge for Throg now that Masters of Innovation have arrived, but you're still pretty capable of dealing with it, in my opinion. You just sort of lack a lot of like anti-air stuff. But even a couple of javelins is all you really need. A couple of javelin units to take out a Thunder Barge, if you can get them over there before they bloody shoot you down. So I'm going to put Throg at moderate. I would have put it at easy prior to patch 5.0, but with the inclusion of that, I think it's gone down to moderate. And with Wulfric the Wanderer, I actually think it's pretty damn easy for him because he doesn't start really anywhere near Legendary Lords. You confederate that enemy that you start off with straight away, and then you just go and take out enemies left, right, and center and just confederate. It's super easy for Wulfric to just conquer all of Norsca because just no one's challenging him. He doesn't have to face off against any Legendary Lords. It's not like he's dealing with the player as Be'lakor, because personally, when I play as Be'lakor, I always invade Wulfric first. But AI Be'lakor usually doesn't do that. So you just don't have any Legendary Lords to face off against, which makes his initial campaign pretty easy. I don't think it is too easy, though. Norsca's still, not the strongest faction in the game. And when you do eventually come up against an opponent, Norsca is very heavily hated, especially by the Empire. You'll probably get dogpiled on a little bit. But overall, I don't think it's a difficult campaign. All right, so moving on to Lizardmen, we've got Oxyotl. So Oxyotl is opposing Kairos Fateweaver, but Kairos Fateweaver has more enemies to deal with, whereas Oxyotl only really has to deal with Kairos Fateweaver. There's a bunch of minor demon factions along the way, but that's basically just a training ground for Oxyotl. It's not a player trap, so you just plow your way through, eventually get to Kairos. Kairos probably won't even be there, so you get to capture his capital while he's not there, and weaken him at the very beginning of it. So I actually think that Oxyotl is a pretty easy campaign, because even if you don't want to do that, you just teleport somewhere else because you got plenty of other missions. So you could literally go anywhere you want as Oxyotl. It's and at the moment he's a friggin' Rambo machine gun as well. Although I do expect that to be patched in the coming patch, but we'll see. They might not. We'll see. Okay, then we've got Nakai the Wanderer. So Nakai the Wanderer in Warhammer 2, I would have considered that to be brutal, but he's gotten some serious upgrades, and now I actually kind of consider him to have a pretty bloody easy campaign. I don't think it's too easy, because his economy initially is not fantastic, but I reckon once you get to around turn 30, if you haven't been, like, if none of Nakai's forces have been defeated, you're basically unstoppable from that point. As soon as you've got like a Kroxagor army going, and you got him his main settlement building to tier 3, yeah, there's no stopping him at that point. Your vassal will be able to provide you with just tons of extra money. Very easy campaign in my opinion. Not too easy though. Not an absolute pushover, because there are some Legendary Lords you have to deal with, but not straight away. Okay, then we've got Gorok. I think Gorok is pretty easy. I'm also going to go into... Oh, would I put it as too easy? Maybe. Yeah, you know what? I actually go too easy for Gorok, because he does start off with Croak. Your initial enemy is a Nurgle faction that basically just doesn't put up a fight. And then you can go down and fight Skrulk straight away. And in all honesty, it's pretty friggin' easy. So the more aggressive you are, the better. Gorok is incredibly powerful. Starts off with one of the richest cities in the game. Yeah, it's pretty easy. Doesn't matter who you fight. It's going to be pretty easy. Okay, then we've got Tic-Tac-Toe. So Tic-Tac-Toe, I think, has just a moderately challenging campaign, just because his start position isn't quite as good as the others, as Gorok. Tic-Tac-Toe himself is not super powerful in terms of his combat abilities, but it really comes down to how much he boosts his armies, especially Coatls. Being able to get Coatls at tier 3 is a big boost for him, but that's not necessarily the initial part of it. We also need to consider now that he is going to be going up against Wurzag a lot earlier than previously. That's now going to be in his way. So that will make it a little bit more challenging than it was before, dealing with a major Greenskin faction. So we're going to put him moderate there. Then we've got Tehenowin. Now, Tehenowin is, in my opinion, the most powerful of the Lizardmen factions, but your start position isn't necessarily the easiest, because you've got to deal with Skrulk, and you're going to have mostly skinks to deal with at the beginning, and Skrulk just doesn't really care that much about you having a few skinks, and they will outnumber you. He's got a very powerful sort of sacrifice mechanic that makes things a lot easier. Eventually, this becomes absolutely trivial, but at the early stages of the campaign, there is a little bit of challenge. You've got to be somewhat careful, especially with Rakarth, because Rakarth builds up if you ignore him, which he shouldn't really be that much of a priority. You definitely should try to take out a Skaven, because that is your primary objective. But yeah, at some point, you're going to have to deal with Rakarth. He always comes down and attacks down that way, and that is quite dangerous. So I'm going to put this one here at easy. Just be mindful of Rakarth. Rakarth is basically what stops this from becoming very easy. See, with Gorok, you don't have to deal with Rakarth quite as early as what Tehenowin has to deal with him. Okay, then we've got Krokgar. So Krokgar, very powerful legendary lord. His faction effects have been improved in Warhammer 3. But what I find a bit challenging, I suppose, in his campaign is that the distance between the settlements are quite wide, which means you got to go a long distance to capture these settlements, so you're not capturing a lot of territory really quickly, and so expansion is kind of slow. He's also semi-surrounded by opponents that don't like him. Like to your north, you've got Khalida. You can maybe negotiate with her, but as you go down south dealing with your initial Skaven enemy, you will eventually encounter Kairos Fateweaver, who is one of the worst opponents to go up against. But that being said, you do start off fairly close to other Lizardmen factions, such as Tic-Tac-Toe and to some degree Oxyotl. So a lot of that actually requires a bit of luck that they do a good job, but getting some early confederations is definitely good. I'm going to put this one here at moderate difficulty because honestly it can be a little bit RNG based. It largely depends on your allies, the like I said, Tic-Tac-Toe and Oxyotl, because sometimes Oxyotl could just plow right over, as an AI Oxyotl will plow over Kairos, and that way you don't have to deal with it, but usually that's not the case. Okay, then we've got Mazdamundi. So Mazdamundi actually has kind of challenging position because you've got a Slaanesh faction to deal with, and then you've also got Skeggy, and then to your south, you've now got Yuan Bo there. And to your north, you've got the Cult of Pleasure. And honestly, Fat Toad over here, Pepe the Frog, probably not really as powerful as he really should be, even though he's a Slan. Slans did get an improvement. I still think he's not quite as powerful as he should be. So I'm going to put this one here as hard because there's quite a lot working against you at the beginning stage of the campaign. So you've got to be pretty damn aggressive to lock that area down and then decide which way you're going to go. The thing is, if you go north to go and fight the Cult of Pleasure, they're probably going to declare war on you. That territory is of no value to you whatsoever as well, so that you could really easily get bogged down fighting them there. And then, of course, Yuan Bo can get very powerful as well. So, yeah, it's up to you. And then there's a Hunts Martial Expedition. They don't like you very much because they don't like lizards. So you just got to be careful with Mazdamundi. I think overall his faction effects are pretty meh. I am hoping for a Lizardman rework that will primarily boost the Geomantic Web. I think that's the big thing that lets him down. Okay, now we move on to Kislev. We have got the Ostankia. So she starts off just east of Marathi's position. Can't remember exactly what the settlement's name's called. Not one of my favorite campaigns whatsoever, and that might be because I actually think this campaign is too easy. It's it's brain dead easy. Your initial enemies are an absolute pushover. You're pretty strong in diplomacy for the high elves that are nearby. Dealing with Morathi early on is quite easy because you can just delete her corruption. Some of the hexes are just downright broken, overpowered. Basically just reskinning Grom the Pauncher's mechanic for like the third time. But yeah, this is a super broken OP campaign, especially if you spam like loads of forest spiders or whatever they are. That can actually be a really broken unit. But overall, her campaign mechanic's strong. Your only real initial enemy is Morathi, and it's just easy to deal with her in the early stages of the campaign with Estancia. So very easy campaign, that one. Okay, then we've got Boris. Boris's campaign is easy. I'm just kidding. It's brutal. It's fuck. Brutal. He just does not have a good time. Boris Ursus. So you start off in the Chaos Wastes, which some of it is considered frozen, so that's green territory, and then you've got other areas that are like just unpleasant. But it's more a case of the enemies that you're going up against. So you've got Archaon the Everchosen as your initial enemy, and then you've also got the Demon Prince on your ass as well. And it's basically non-stop fighting belligerent pricks of just for ages. You've got Tamurkhan after Archaon, or you've got Epidemius and Malice Darkblade after that. You just don't really get a break. Going down south, like abandoning your start position and going down south, is a vastly easier option. But that means you're delaying your campaign, your true campaign start by a fair bit. So that can be be very annoying. So yeah, very brutal start. Boris Ursus has. Okay, then we've got Castelton. Castelton's okay. You really need to take out Azazel and Clan Moldor very quickly. That's really important with him. Starting off at Erengrad, very powerful settlement, very rich. But yeah, you got to move fast with him for sure. I'm going to put this one here at moderate difficulty. Then when it comes to Catarin, I'm actually going to put her at hard difficulty because I think that she has more challenges to deal with than Castelton. Because when it comes to Catarin, you start off with this Bearsonling Norscan faction. They're easy enough to deal with. Which then puts you on borders with like multiple enemies. So you've got Azag the Slaughterer, who pretty much needs to be dealt with straight away. If you don't deal with it, he'll declare war on you. You've also got Draika, who, again, if you don't give her some territory, she'll probably declare war on you. There's Vlad von Carstein, who probably will declare war on you. Then there's, to your north, you've got Clan Moldor, who will definitely declare war on you. And then you've got Azazel. And even though Azazel will probably destroy Castalton pretty quickly, and guess what? He'll then declare war on you. So I think that Catarin has a more challenging campaign than Castalton, because playing as Catarin, you can't rely on Castalton to survive, whereas playing as Castalton, you can rely on Catarin to survive, and thereby relieving some of that pressure. It's a bit weird with that, but overall I do think Catarin is more powerful, but yeah, the initial enemies that she has to deal with can be quite difficult. Not to the same extent that Boris has, so I'm not putting her down as brutal. Okay, now we're moving on to the High Elves. So Imric. Imric, very powerful legendary lord, but kind of a weird start position for him. I guess it's kind of fitting, being that the fire dude starting in the Darklands going up against the fire dudes, going up against Chaos Dwarfs. At least he's able to strip them of their fire resistance, so that's okay. But yeah, if you can manage to try not to use flaming attacks, that would actually be even better in most cases against them. That being said, the High Elves build up their power base a bit faster than Chaos Dwarfs do. Most of the Chaos Dwarf armies that you fight will just be laborers, so it's not going to be that big a deal in the early stage of the campaign. The moment he's got his dragon, it's GG for them. So I'm going to put it at moderate difficulty, because as we have seen, you can definitely fail your campaign playing with Imric. So you just got to be careful with it. Just a lot of very powerful enemies. If you can manage to get a confederation with Kalador, which you need to move very quickly to do that, because Kalador gets wiped out by Noctilus very quickly. That then gives you the opportunity to just go home, which is much better than the Darklands. But if you can manage to hold on to both, that's even better. Anyway, then we have Eltharion. So this is a weird one, because you've got 2 start positions as well, sort of. 2 start positions. And it doesn't really make a lot of sense, because you've got Ivres going up against a Greenskin faction, where you've got a very small army to deal with them. And then you've got his army, doing an expedition hunting for Grom the Porch in the Badlands, even though Grom the Paunch is in Bretonnia now. So it's a bit weird. I do think his campaign needs adjustment because he's actually further away from Grom the Paunch than his actual start position at Yvres. So it's just really, really weird. The easiest way to go about it is basically just capture that first settlement and then just disband his army and just go straight back to straight back to Ulthuan. Otherwise, you're splitting your resources up. But if you do want to stay in the Badlands, that is the more challenging campaign for sure, and holding on to 2 starting positions. But I'm going to put that as like what is the intended way to play the campaign, and that way it is hard to play that way. So it's easy if you just go back to Ulthuan. It is hard if you want to hold on to both positions. Okay, then we've got Elithanar. I've played a lot of Elithanar, so I've got to come at this from an objective point of view, not subjective. I find Elithanar's campaign super easy, but that's because I'm really experienced with it. He does have a bit of initial challenge dealing with Silostra. Silostra usually attacks you while you're still dealing with Karen Carr. So I'm going to put this at... I think it's a little bit more challenging than Imric. No, it's about the same. Yeah, I'm gonna put it at moderate there, right next to it, about the same. Just because Silostra, easy enough to beat her, especially if you ambush her, because he's basically a Skaven high elf. But yeah, your capital is kind of right on her border, but you need to go towards Karen Carr, I think it is, to finish off those guys. I can't remember what they're called. Karen Carr, I guess. And while you're there, Silostra usually does take the advantage and attacks you. So if you move quickly enough, you can prevent it, but it can be a bit of a challenge. Moderate challenge, that is. Very powerful Legendary Lord, Elithanar. But that being said, you're not surrounded by a whole lot of friends. He's not even particularly well liked by other High Elves. But if you do your assassinations, which is not too difficult to do, that'll boost your relations with High Elves, and you'll get confederations in Ulthuan in no time. That being said, Ulthuan is actually not pleasant territory for him, but that doesn't matter. It's still worth getting. Okay, then we've got Avalorn. I think that Avalorn is an easy campaign because your initial enemy, the Scourge of Cain, pretty easy to fight. Then there's Slaanesh. It's called Nakari. You can usually attack Nakari while he's busy fighting Kothik or Yvres. So if you time it correctly, you can basically cripple him super easily. And as I've said before, Slaanesh's initial forces are not super strong. They're hard hitting. They're glass cannons. So the high elf economy is better than the Slaanesh economy in the early stage of the campaign. So even if you're playing on the higher difficulties, you can usually out economy Nakari. So he's not that difficult to deal with. That being said, he's a very big target. Shooting him is super easy, especially considering you start off with a Sisters of Avalorn. So magical attacks against him just burn him to pieces. He's very quick to kill. So I don't think it's too challenging for her. And then once you've done that, you basically start a confederation spamming because everybody just loves you. It's just super easy to get confederations in Ulthuan. And then you've basically got an entire continent without even having to have many wars. So it's pretty easy. Then, of course, Marathi invades, but you can deal with it. It's not as hard as it used to be in Warhammer 2. Okay, then we've got Teclis. I think Teclis's campaign is brutal. Brutal campaign because your initial enemy is Sarthrael the Everwatcher. That's easy. And then after that, you've got a choice. You either go down south and you fight someone with destitute. It's just not good territory for you. And it's a difficult opponent, that being Kairos Fateweaver. And then you can either hold on to that territory, which is worth nothing, basically, or you can sell it to Oxyotl for a little bit, I guess, and that way you've got a friend. Or you can go north and declare war on Lizardmen, which will piss off all the other Lizardmen, and then they'll declare war on you. So you're in this weird position where you've got very dangerous opponents that are just not fun to fight. There's no real incentive to fight them. And you're surrounded by lizards that, if you decide to fight, will just gang up on you. So Teclis is in a really fucking weird position in his campaign. Really not a campaign that gives you a whole lot of good options. That's just like, if you just do this, then profit. It's like every decision that you make with Teclis is bad. Go to war with the lizards, bad. Go to war with Kairos, bad. Probably the best thing for him to do is just fucking go home. Because it's just not a great place to be for the High Elves there. Okay, then we've got Tyrion, who is too easy. Super easy campaign, this one. This is one of the recommended starting campaigns, and I agree with this one. This is usually the one that I actually push it right up to here as the second easiest even. So you have an initial enemy that is super easy to take out, and then you're surrounded by people who are friendly with you. And unlike with Techless, you can actually confederate them, like, really easily. If you want to go and fight Safari, super easy to do that, especially early on in the campaign. If you want to go and take out Noctilus, you can do that, because he usually takes out Calidor. You'll pretty easily be able to confederate Ivres and Avalon. I don't think that's too difficult. And you don't really even need to deal with Nakari, not unless Ivres and Avalon both fail, which that sometimes does happen. But, you know, sending your forces up to support them makes it a lot easier for them to be able to beat it. And then you could just take that territory if that's what you want to do. But whatever the case is, Tyrion's got a very easy campaign. Public order's not a problem for him. Money's not a problem for him. Confederation's not a problem for him. Don't go down the bloodline of an Aryan, because as soon as you do that, you pump it down to easy campaign. That's all. And don't pick up the Sword of Cain, because then you pump it down to medium. It's up to you how. I guess that's the thing with Tyrion's campaign. You can make it more challenging by making bad decisions. That's entirely up to you. I mean, that's lore friendly. He made some bad decisions, you know. Okay, then we've got Skarbrand. All right, so Skarbrand, I would say, is actually the most powerful lord. Oh my god, we're at an hour and I'm like halfway through this. Holy shit. Anyway. Okay, so Skarbrand, I would actually say, is the most powerful faction in the entire game. But it's not actually easy to play it in that sort of powerful way. I think that if you're new to Skarbrand, even with probably the rework, probably not the easiest campaign to play. So I'm actually going to put it at moderate, because I think it's, like I said, it's a very melee-focused faction. You got a lot of enemies. If you know how to play Skarbrand well, man, you could dominate super easy. You know, skulls for the skull throw, just as many enemies as possible. It's great. But I think a lot of people just play in a more traditional way and think of building up settlements to build your economy. And Skarbrand, the way he really functions is that fuck your settlements. It just doesn't matter. Like, don't get me wrong, get some settlements, but you need enemies more than you need settlements. So usually what I do with Skarbrand is I just plow through everything that I possibly can. One big downside for him, though, is that he used to have, well, he still does for the next few days, has Wurzag right near him, which is really good for physical resistance. And now Wurzag's gone down south. So maybe the trajectory should be to go down south now, because then you can also pick up Tic-Tac-Toe's trait. Another thing is that it used to be that a cult would start up in the north, so you could teleport up that way. And I don't think that happens anymore due to the cult changes. I'm not entirely sure. So I want to acknowledge that I think that Skarbrand is the most powerful faction in the game because of his ability to just keep moving and killing. But it's not easy to play that way. Okay, then we've got Greenskins. Grom the Paunch. So Grom, I am going to put this at moderate. Powerful legendary lord, surrounded by Bretonnians that are like legendary lord Bretonnians. You got the Fane Changers to the south. You've got Wood Elves that are fairly close by. You've got not Helmut Ghost. You've got Heinrich Kemmler and also Lewin Leoncoeur. And at the beginning stage of the campaign, utilizing just goblins can be a challenge. If you're really good with Grom, you can easily plow through the campaign super easy. Some people say he's like brokenly OP, but playing that way is not necessarily easy. So that's why I'm putting him at moderate, because it's just start position has some powerful opponents. That's all. Okay, so as for Wurzag, I'm going to also put him at moderate. His start position has moved now to go down a little bit further south. Puts him at closer proximity at war with the Lizards. I don't think that's as easy of an opponent as going up against the Dwarfs. I personally think the Dwarfs are easier for Wurzag because he's got Savage Orcs. Savage Orcs are pretty good against early game Dwarfs. And yeah, I think he just plows through that. But now you got to go deal with Lizards. And Lizards can be a bit more tricky because they got magic. They got they're tricksy Lizards, basically. I don't think he's going to have too much trouble because he does create very powerful armies. Basically, anything can be very powerful under his command, but it does take a little bit to get that going. And the Lizards, they're surrounding him. Okay, then we move on to Skarsnik. All right, Skarsnik's campaign basically requires you to take out another Greenskin faction first, and then deal with Karaza Karak. Not that challenging if you move quickly enough, but if you dilly-dally, that can be a problem. At least Skarsnik starts off with the ability to recruit nasty skulkers. Armor-piercing early-game unit, stalking, really good for taking out dwarves. If they've got any artillery, you just sneak around them, take them out while they're shooting at some other target. So I'm going to put This one here at easy. I really think that it's easier for Skarsnik to take out... Sorry. Player Skarsnik to take out AI Karazakarak than it is for player Karazakarak to take out Skarsnik. Once you've done that, there are quite a few enemies in the area. There's to the north, you've got Karak Kadrin, but at the same time, there's Azag the Slaughterer, who is also an enemy, but if you attack him, you can confederate him. So it kind of works well for the Greenskins to be aggressive and actually attack other Greenskins. You've also got Grimgor Ironhide nearby, and soon you will have Gorbad Ironclaw nearby as well. So all of that, I think, will make his campaign relatively easy. Okay, then we've got Grimgor Ironhide. So Grimgor's campaign, I don't think is particularly challenging. I'm also going to put that as easy. You start off at war with a bunch of minor ogres. There is the Warriors of Chaos faction, Kolek nearby. You don't have to fight it if you don't want to. I usually do. I usually find it to be pretty easy. Grimgor is usually in a pretty good position to do so because Kolek is trying to fight someone else, probably Tamrakhan, and you can catch him with his pants down. Take away his Dark Fortress, and Kolek just has no ability to recruit anything else, and you can just pump out units like crazy as Grimgor, so that's not a problem at all. Okay, then we've got Azag the Slaughterer. I think Azag's campaign is a little bit more challenging. I'm going to put it at hard because you've got to go up against Karak Kadrin early on, which has lots of Slayers. That's not easy to deal with when you're using either Orc Boys or Orc Boy Biggins, basically. Not good against the Slayer Keep. So very difficult initial enemy for Azag to deal with. Quite a challenge. And then, of course, after you've dealt with that, there's still... Everywhere you go, there's enemies that are kind of more powerful than you. At least until you get on Skull Muncher and you're casting good death magic. But that takes some time. Especially considering you need to get his quest item in order to get advanced death magic. Okay, now we're moving on to Grand Cathay. We've got Yuan Bo, who I'm going to put this as too easy. You do start off with 2 start positions, and it's actually really easy to hold on to both, because Yuan Bo's main campaign mechanic is just super powerful, and whether you can decide to sell off your territory that you start off at Cathay to the Western Provinces, and it gives you loads of money. But that being said, it's actually really easy to just hold on to both positions, because the initial enemy at Cathay is the Vampire Counts one. They're not ready to fight you because they're already fighting someone else. So you just take territory away from them very easily. And the enemies that you go and fight in Lustria are also quite easy. It's the Greenskin faction that just isn't very good at fighting you. The Blue Vipers or whatever they are. So Yuan Bo, very powerful. Okay, then we've got the Western Provinces here. So that's Xiaoming. I'm going to put Xiaoming as easy. I think you're in a pretty good solid position there at the start. You start off with a minor settlement as your capital, but it's very easy to go and get the Hanyu port and then eventually Shangyang. Very easy enemies to begin with, no major factions. You start off with a pretty good friendship with Balthazar Gelt, who recently showed up there. Overall, not too difficult. You can be fairly friendly with Greasus Goldtooth. You will probably have to deal with either Kugas Plaguefather or Helman Gorst, but you don't have to do that straight away. You'll have a bit of time to get set up for that. Okay, now as for Miao Ying, a bit more challenging for her because she's got to be protecting the bastions, and those settlements get fucked pretty damn early. So I wouldn't put it at hard. I'd probably go more moderate because, yeah, she has to protect the bastion settlements because otherwise you get the invasions from those Norscans, which is super annoying and you can't turn that off. So you've got Village the Curseling and Zatan the Black coming in from the north. You've also got Tzeentch in the south. And to the far east, you've got Lokia Felheart. All of those lead to a moderate challenge, I think, because she is very powerful. Starting with Nangao is a very powerful settlement. Okay, now we move on to the Empire. So Elspeth von Draken, I'm going to put her as easy. You've got great gunpowder capabilities early on. It's actually quite easy to take out Vlad early. She's incredibly powerful. Her faction mechanic is incredibly powerful. Just not a challenging campaign, in my opinion, because you've just got all the tools that you need to deal with them straight away. Going with cavalry-based gunpowder, such as Outriders and Pistoliers, works wonders against early-game vampire counts, and you just have those units available straight away. Okay, Marcus Wolfheart. This one used to be what I would consider brutal, but in Warhammer 3, I'd say it's actually gone to hard. Now that you've got a fair... Oh, the Skull Taker just showed up there as well. Well, I haven't played that. It doesn't look like... okay. Well, I haven't played it, so I don't know. So I'm going to leave it at hard, because one of the things that I think made his campaign super annoying was his main campaign mechanic, causing Lizardmen armies to constantly show up. But at least that doesn't... That can be turned off now, but that's not really in the early stages of the campaign, which is the thing that we should rank the most. But yeah, I definitely think this is a hard campaign, just because of all the challenges that are in Lustria. And Empire forces, I don't think, fight very well in Lustria, including archer-based units, like the Huntsman. Okay, then we've got Balthazar Gelt. Balthazar Gelt's campaign is pretty bloody easy, because your initial enemy, the Burning Wind Nomads, super easy to take out. His main campaign mechanic is broken overpowered. You can easily get a Doomstack with him super bloody early. And you just do whatever the hell you want in Grand Cathay. That being said, people have been known to have disasters. I've had a few disasters sent in with Balthazar Gelt that have taken me quite a while to fix up. And those are usually sent in from newer players. But of the Empire factions, this is probably him or Elspeth I would recommend starting with. Because Karl Franz, while it is the recommended one, I don't think it's the easiest. Okay, then we've got Volkmar the Grim. I would put it at moderate for him. So, yeah, you got to deal with the vampire counts, but I actually think it's pretty easy dealing with the vampires, because if you attack him early enough, he's not on a mount, and his forces are mostly just zombies. Manfred's not that challenging in the earlier stages of the campaign. Obviously, if you let him get built up, then that's a different story. So attacking him early is the way to go. Once you've done that, taking on Khemri, easy. Going after the Books and Nagash, not a problem for him at all. Definitely not the easiest start position, though, because there's just a lot of legendary lords around. But you can negotiate with a lot of them. So diplomacy is a big strong point for Volkmar the Grim. Now, as for Karl Franz, I'm actually going to put this as hard, but not quite as hard as Marcus Wolfhart's. The problem with Karl Franz's campaign is that you get a lot of good tools at your disposal, but it's just like non-stop problems right from the get-go. The secessionists need to be dealt with, which you can now deal with quicker now that you start off with Helmgart. But you have to deal with the Beastmen straight away, because they almost always take out Boris Todbringer straight away. Then you've got the you've got so many enemies. You got Festus straight away, because he takes out all those enemies immediately as well. You've got the Barrow Legion straight away, so Heinrich Kemmler. You've got events that happen and that you need to deal with that will cost you prestige. You've got Imperial authority will constantly go down very quickly as well. Not as crippling as it used to be. You've also got Grom the Paunch, and you've got Vlad von Carstein, all of which have to be dealt with as quickly as possible. So the thing is with Karl Franz's campaign, it requires you to be incredibly aggressive and efficient, or else things go to shit super quickly. And then you've got Norscan invasions that happen as well. So I don't actually recommend you start your first campaign for Total War Warhammer 3 as Karl Franz. These two here are significantly easier in my opinion. Okay, then we're moving on to the Dwarfs. We've got Malachi McCason. So personally, I find Malachi McCason's campaign to be very easy, but a lot of people say that it's a bit of a challenge to begin with, so I'm going to take that into consideration. I guess it's gotten a little bit more challenging with a bit of a nerf to the gyrocopters. So maybe I'll just put it as easy. But his faction mechanics are so powerful, so I struggle to understand how people really struggle with him, even though he does start surrounded by quite a lot of enemies. I find them very easy to deal with, personally. But again, this might be coming from somebody who's just experienced with playing as Malachi. This is my favorite one to play. So I would personally have put it as too easy, if it wasn't for so many people telling me that they actually struggle with this campaign a little bit. I definitely wouldn't put it down to moderate. You just have too many tools at your disposal to justify putting it in moderate. Okay, then we've got Thorek Ironbrow. I think Thorek's in a really good position. Loads of resources in its area. Anyone that you decide to fight is going to be weaker than you. Thorek is very powerful. So I'm going to put this one here at... I'm going to put it as easy. Yeah, because you also have a early game confederation with Karak Azul, which isn't necessarily a good idea. But it's something that you can do. I'm going to put that there as easy well. Because, yeah, Thoric Ironbrow, super bloody powerful Legendary Lord. Okay, then we've got Grombrindle. Grombrindle is incredibly isolated, not super easy campaign, because you've also got so many dangerous opponents. So you got Malekith, who's your primary antagonist, I guess. Got to write that wrong. And then you've also got Valkyr the Bloody, which in my opinion should be more of a priority than Malekith. I usually actually try to team up with Malekith to take out Valkyr and then backstab. Well, actually just wait until he backstabs me, because it's only a matter of time. And then take out Malekith. I'm going to put this campaign here as hard. Ooh, no, actually, yeah, just moderate. Because you do start off at the edge of the map, making it quite a defensible position. So moderate there is where to go. You'll want to get some confederations as early as possible. I suppose with the dwarf rework, that actually makes his campaign a lot easier. Get those confederations as early as possible so that you've got some of the richer, like Karazakarak type areas. But yeah. Okay, but the true difficult campaign for the dwarves is Belegar Ironhammer. I would put this one here borderline brutal, almost at hard. But yeah, this one is a very challenging campaign because having increased upkeep cost plus 50% at the very start of your campaign, even though you've got those ancestor heroes, can be quite challenging. You've got a lot of things to do, potentially. If you want to secure your initial province, you can do that. If you want to go take out Clan Scryer early, you can do that. If you want to go straight over to Carrick 8 Peaks straight away, you can do that. But that's probably the most difficult choice. The Greenskins will bully you like crazy when you're playing as Belegar, and they will just have so many friggin' armies. And Belegar's biggest problem is, of course, his finances are just significantly worse than everyone else. Even though he himself is very strong, having a lack of money, just because your troops are 50% more expensive, is a massive disadvantage compared to the others. Of course, once you've taken Carrick 8 Peaks, that's not necessarily in the early campaign, it's not so difficult at that point. Okay, then we've got Karak Kadrin. I don't think Karak Kadrin is particularly difficult. Slayers are a lot more powerful now than they used to be, but you do have very powerful enemies. You've got Azag the Slaughterer, who in my opinion is not as difficult to deal with as if you're playing as Azag dealing with Ungrim. But you've also got Vlad von Karstein, who will probably declare war on you very early on. So I'm going to put this campaign at hard, just because your economy is not fantastic, but Slayers are very good. So you got a lot to go up against, and your units are good. Just it's going to be hard to afford them. That's all. Okay, and then we've got Karazakarak. This one here I'm going to put at moderate difficulty because I think it's not too difficult taking out Skarsnik. I think it's easier for Skarsnik to take out, as I've mentioned before, take out him than the other way around. You've got Barak Var close to you, but they usually get pounded down pretty quickly. So there's Ogres nearby, and then there's loads of Skaven and Greenskins to your south, making it fairly challenging just to stay on top of all of these problems. And then there's, of course, Crookback Mountain, the Clan Rictus. You've got Tretch Craven Tail is always a pain in the ass. So fair few enemies to deal with, but you've got the tools to deal with it as well. Okay, then moving on to the Dark Elves. We've got Malice Darkblade. Now, the fact that I've been able to conquer the entire world in one turn with Malice Darkblade should be made irrelevant. Most people aren't going to know about that exploit or use it, so I'm not going to take that into consideration whatsoever. But we've got to keep in mind that there are some very powerful enemies around him. Malice has a mechanic that, if you want to make use of Zarkan, it kind of screws up your economy a little bit. So I'm going to put it at moderate because it's not really the best start position, but you do also have Hag Grief, which the AI doesn't start off with. So you can sell that to Malekith if you really want, or you could just abandon the start position and just go straight back to Hag Grief. It's entirely up to you. Whatever the case is, I don't think it's as challenging as it used to be, and Malice is very powerful. Okay, then we've got Rakarth. Rakarth is nestled quite securely on the Total Isles, so you don't really have to go up against any legendary lords until you are the one to declare war on them, unless you want to be really passive. So I think this campaign here is actually quite easy, just because you're basically given a free pass to just do whatever you want while everyone else is busy. And you can build a very powerful army full of monsters very, very quickly and plow down them. Being secured on a difficult-to-reach area does make a campaign fairly easy for any particular legendary lord. Lokir Felheart, another one that's basically nestled in a corner of the map. This campaign is easy as hell. Super bloody easy campaign with Lokir Felheart, because you will end up pumping out them Black Arcs like crazy, and his armies are super strong, especially against the early game enemies, against the Vampire Coast and against Cathay. He is an absolute menace in that area. Very easy campaign there for Lockyer Felhard. There's so many slaves. You just make ridiculous amounts of money with him, and money means more soldiers. And of course, loads of Black Arcs means cheap soldiers. So I usually by like turn 30, I've got like 10 Black Arcs sailing around the world, just plundering things, making just ridiculous amounts of money. Very easy campaign, difficult one to lose. Because yeah, if for example, if you really screwed up and they ended up taking your capital of Haichai, well, if you've got a bunch of Black Arcs, whatever, just abandon start position, just sail around the world and just go somewhere else and plunder. That would pirate's life for him. You could do it. Difficult campaign to lose, really. Okay, now, Marathi. Marathi's campaign used to be fairly brutal, but now I think it is kind of just moderate. She's a bit more powerful than she used to be because she's got Slaanesh corruption, which actually benefits her, because it gives her a bit of extra public order, which is a big advantage for Dark Elves because slaves cause public order problems, and they don't really have good public order mitigation abilities apart from diktats, which it's annoying to use up slaves to get rid of public order problems, especially if you're playing on legendary difficulty. It's not as difficult for her to invade Ulthuan as was before because they just don't pump out the same number of armies as they used to. They don't become a crazy threat straight away. You do have to deal with Ostankia, but you going up against Ostankia is easier than the other way around if it's the AI coming at you. So it's really not that big of a problem, but Ostankia does have an easier time at it. I don't think I made myself very clear on that. Let me just rephrase that. It is easier for Marathi to deal with her when she is the AI. But if you're playing as this faction here, as Ostankia, it is easier when she's the AI, obviously. Usually Ostankia is the one that actually gets wiped out, but when controlled by the player, it's much stronger. Okay, then we've got Malekith. So I think Malekith is borderline brutal, but I'm going to put it at hard, just because he's got a lot of tools at his disposal, but he's also got a lot of enemies. So you've got Valkyr to your north, you've got Taurox to your south, you've got also Alithanar to your south as well. You've also got Grombrindle in that area, and public order is a problem for him, and it could just end up a bit of a campaign mess with Malekith, because it doesn't really have any interesting campaign mechanics at all in order to do anything interesting, because it's just a base game faction for Warhammer 2. Okay, then we've got Hellebron. I also think that Hellebron's start position is hard as well. Similar problem that Malekith has, even though they're like right next to each other. When it comes down to Hellebron, she has the added problem of dealing with Sigvald the Magnificent, who is a very difficult opponent to go and fight. Another thing is that as you go and fight them, going to the Chaos Waste, it's not pleasant territory, so you're not making much profit doing that. Also, confederating these two is quite a challenge. Dark Elves don't get along, so they don't unify as easily as High Elves do, for example. All right, then we've got Daniel the Demon Prince. So Daniel the Demon Prince gets very powerful pretty slowly. Well, no, you can get his favor built up quickly. It's just that doesn't make him very strong very quickly. And building up his economy is quite slow, and you do have some very powerful enemies close by. I'm going to put this one as hard, just because you've got a kind of very basic campaign at the early stage. I really think that the Undivided Demon Prince kind of needs a rework, but he's very much become forgotten. But once you've secured that area, you can snowball out of control. But those initial 30 turns are vital and can very easily screw that up. Okay, then we've got Zatan the Black. I think Zatan the Black has a sort of moderate difficulty campaign, not super difficult. You do have to deal with Grimgor. If you ignore Grimgor, you're going to have a hard time getting convoys out, so you just have to deal with that. You can be pretty friendly with Kurlik Suneater, or you can go east and go into Cathay, which is usually what the AI does. But yeah, main thing here is that he has access to 2 convoys right away, and if you don't deal with Grimgor, Grimgor will raid those caravans, because they'll always show up at Tsar Nagrand. And Grimgor is just always camping that area. So that's why I'm putting that at moderate. Okay, then we've got Zatan no, that was Zatan the Black. This is Drazoath the Ashen. So Drazoath is, in my opinion, the most powerful of the Chaos Dwarves, but doesn't necessarily have the easiest start position. You could definitely, if you're good at the game, you could do a very good job of it. There's no doubt about that. But You have to be very aggressive very early on because he doesn't start off super powerful straight away. You've got to get onto his mount and get a bunch of items. That all takes time. You've also got Imric to deal with, having flaming attacks, dealing with the flame resistance to it. Again, the same applies to you. Feel a little bit of a challenge, especially if he gets on his dragon. You need to take him out very quickly. You can be fairly friendly with the Skaven, but I usually try to take out Tzeentch anyway, because otherwise his armies are just everywhere causing corruption, and I just don't like that happening, so I try to take him out first. I'm going to put this one here at moderate as well. You just need to be very aggressive with it, that's all. Astrogoth, in my opinion, has the easiest campaign of the Chaos Dwarfs. I'm going to put him at just easy. Starts off super strong even at level 1, just because he's essentially on his mount, which is his mechanical frame. Very powerful spellcaster. You've got access to very good units to begin with. You don't really have powerful enemies to worry about. You're very close to Grimgor, right? Which is kind of a good thing, because all 3 of the Chaos Dwarf factions kind of need to take out Grimgor as quickly as possible, and the earlier that you can get to Grimgor, the better. So he's in the best position to pound town on Grimgor, so you should probably do that, because your northern border is pretty secure. Okay, then we've got Bretonnia. So Repance, I think, is a pretty easy campaign. You don't really have any massively dangerous opponents early on. You've got access to knights straight away at Kofa. You've got a good economy. You've got the ability to mitigate the desert attrition. You've got other Bretonnian factions close by that you can use as allies and confederate. You've got Volkmar the Grim you can use as an ally. And you're not really in a particularly challenging position. So I think Repance is pretty easy. And she's also very powerful. And she has Enri the Massive, who is not a legendary hero. He's considered a unique hero. I want to make that distinction. Okay, then we've got the Fey Enchantress, who in my opinion is the most powerful of the Bretonnians, but actually has a very hard start position. I'm going to put her as hard because to the north you've got Grom the Paunch, to the south you've got Morgur, and then you've got Ikiclaw. These are very powerful, dangerous opponents in your initial stages to fight. And you basically have to fight all of them before you can progress really anywhere else. She's very powerful, and once you've done that, you can get super rich. But yeah, it's just that initial challenge of dealing with those annoying, corrupting and ambush-inducing and army spamming enemies. And you got to move quickly very early on, because another problem is that you just can't really recruit very good units early on with Bretonnia. And you're going to, of course, have their present limit. Okay, then we've got Alberic, the most generic legendary lord in the game, who... just not very impressive at all, even though he's moved over to Lustria, and just nothing impressive about him there. I'm going to say his campaign is probably... I'm going to put it at hard. You know, you got Skulltaker coming at you right away, and Bretonnia is just not it needs a rework, basically. It's just not a particularly strong faction, and Lustria is not an easy place to thrive in easily, that's all. But I don't think it is brutal. Okay, then we've got Lewin Leoncoeur. I don't think it's too difficult for Lewin. I mean, you start off smashing Mousillon pretty early on. You're actually in a bit of a trick start, actually. If you just forget about Mousillon, you can take out the Greenskins earlier that start off to your south. That would be better, because Mousillon, they're not going to engage with Khorne early on. So take out the Greenskins, because the Greenskins will spam some dangerous units early on. I'm going to put this at moderate difficulty, because the way that the game leans you to go towards is probably unintuitive, and just people will very easily fall for what is a player trap. So I'll put it at moderate there. Okay, now we're talking about Beastmen. So Beastmen, okay, Taurox. Okay, Beastmen, freaking just easy. Okay, do I even need to explain it? If you've played Taurox, you know what I mean, right? Taurox just kills things, right? He's a one-man doomstack straight away. Ambush attack, you have a rampage and just move like crazy. No one can really beat him early on in the campaign. You get Minotaurs and just plow through everything. How can you lose this campaign? You can confederate them all really quickly. You just get so much dread. Oh, it's ridiculously easy. Morgur, I definitely think that all of the Beastmen are pretty easy, but I'm going to put him at just regular easy, not too easy. Because again, you've got Ikiclaw to deal with. If you want to deal with him, you don't have to. Or you can go north and deal with the Fey Enchantress. And they don't play by the same rules as the player. They'll be able to just spam out units where the player won't be able to due to the peasant limit, but they don't have the peasant limit, so that's just something you got to deal with. But if you see an army come down, you ambush it, not that big of a deal. And Morgr is very powerful even from level 1. Okay, then we've got Malagor the Dark Omen. I'm going to put Malagor actually on moderate, just because his start position kind of sucks. You know, you start off sandwiched in between like a vampire account, and then there's Khorne nearby, and all of the territories just take a long time to get to, and so you don't get momentum moving. You don't get as much dread going as possible. And the vampires that are nearby just don't really want to engage you until they build up a big force, and then they can be kind of annoying to deal with. But Malagor eventually becomes a very powerful spellcaster, one of the best in the game. Okay, then we've got Khazrak One-Eye. Starts dealing with the Lorelorn Forest, but it's pretty easy to deal with, so I don't think that's much of a challenge. I'm going to put this one as easy, because as soon as you've got a Herdstone anywhere, you've got 15% extra ambush success chance with him. And as I've said so many times before, the Empire is like the easiest early game faction to go and beat down on. You've got Festus the Leech Lord nearby, who can be friendly if you want, or at least draw some attention away from you. So there's a lot working for your favor in a Khazrak One-Eye campaign. Okay, now I'm going to talk about the legendary lords that I haven't played. So these are new legendary lords coming to the game. I've seen enough of them to sort of have a guess at how difficult they're likely to be. But time will tell. I mean, this is something that if you're like, no, Legend, you're completely wrong about this, that's fine. I'm just taking a guess with this. I haven't played it yet, you know. So like I said, just taking a guess. So we got Golg Man-Eater. I'm not saying his real name because, you know, I don't need to go into that. I think that this is going to be a moderately challenged campaign because, he's got two choices to go up against early on. They're both very easy, and then you kind of just act as a mercenary for the rest of the campaign, and it's just not difficult for him because. You're always allying with someone, essentially, and just getting rewards from doing it. And you're not really anyone's primary enemy, from what I can see. But again, haven't played it, so it's hard to tell. But it looks moderate, like just sort of medium challenge. I don't think he's overly powerful, but I just don't think the enemy really go for you. So it's a case of you're not really going to be defeated in your campaign. You might fail a contract, but I don't think that'll cause you to fail a campaign. Okay, then we've got Skull Taker. Same sort of thing with Skull Taker as it is with Scarbrand. I think Scarbrand and Skull Taker are going to be very powerful, but I'm not sure how easy they will be to use. It does seem as though Skull Taker's initial start position seems easier than Scarbrand's, just because the quality of the legendary lords you're going up against is easier than what Scarbrand has to deal with. And also Scarbrand, the distance between those settlements is a lot larger, which is actually bad. When you're playing as Khorne, you want to be destroying settlements as often as possible, and Lustria is a bit more concentrated, just a bit. Okay, and then we've got Arbal the Undefeated. So this guy here basically is Oxyotl 2.0, just teleports around, smashing things up. Looks super bloody strong. But yeah, if you lose a battle, you basically lose the campaign or become like neutered, sort of. But I imagine that he becomes powerful enough that most of these challenges should not really be that challenging to deal with. So I'm going to put it at moderate, but it's really hard to tell without having actually played it myself. Okay, and then we've got Gorbad Ironclaw, and I'm going to put that at easy because it's a similar position to Skarsnik. You start off at Black Crag. I guess that's why they moved Grimgor out of there in anticipation of this guy. Don't know. And Gorbad is able to... It doesn't start off at war with any major factions, but you would probably go up against Karazakarak early, which would, if you can time that right, you would be basically teaming up with Skarsnik, take out Karazakarak while what's his name? Thorgrim is in the eastern part of his thing, just take the settlement, and then you and Skarsnik both team up to smash him, and then as soon as that's done, you kill Skarsnik and confederate him. So... both of their campaign starts, I imagine, are pretty similar, so I should just put them right next to each other there. Anyway, that's my pick there. Now, as for those last four, those are just guesses, having just watched a little bit of other people's gameplay without having played it myself. I'm totally not opposed to redoing this later down the track, if this is what you guys want to see. But anyway, that's my tier list there. It went on way longer than I thought, but I thought it was important to be thorough. So if you're looking to start a new campaign, if you're looking to start Total War Warhammer 3, and you're looking for something easy, these are the factions that I would recommend that you start with. These are the easiest ones. And if you are new to the game, I would avoid these ones. But if you're looking for a challenge, these are the ones to go. That being said, any campaign can be made challenging if you just hamstring yourself, and any of these campaigns can be made easy if you just know everything about these factions. Like, for example, with Kara's Fateweaver, I don't particularly have that much trouble with that campaign because I know how to play Tzeentch. But it's not intuitive, and it requires you to cheese the living shit out of it, which is fine for me, but most people probably aren't going to do that. Anyway, that's the end of this one here, guys. Let me know in the comments below what you think of this rating, whether you agree or disagree. Let me know if you think one lord belongs in another position or another. You know, there's hundreds, quite a lot to go through now. Anyway, don't forget to check out Manscaped, link in the pinned comment and the description. Appreciate you guys, and we'll see you next time. Later, guys.